Welcome, everyone, back to the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you're all safe. I hope you're all keeping really well at the moment as well. You wouldn't believe how many requests I've had to get today's guest on the podcast. And I'm really pleased. No, I'm thrilled to say that I'm joined by actor, writer, of Mortimer and Whitehouse Gone Fishing, Paul Whitehouse. Paul, it's great to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Pete. Yeah, just something about that introduction that bothered me, and that was the use of the word Mortimer, and I class it as a word, not a name, before Whitehouse. Only the Angling Times got it right when we won some award or other. Whitehouse and Mortimer.
I've got to apologise. I
looked
it up.
No, you're all right, Pete. It is called Mortimer and Whitehouse Gone Fishing, but I wake up at 3 o'clock every morning going, why did I let that little northern novice go first?
Did that take a lot of negotiating?
Courtesy, charm, and old school gentlemanly behaviour.
Absolutely. Well, I was very nervous then because I'd obviously done all my homework and thought, God, I've not got off to a very good start here. So I'm pleased to hear at least I got part of it right. So tell me, in the lockdown and stuff, I know in the programme that you tied a really nifty mayfly. Are you one of these people during the lockdown that you've tied about 20,000 flies, or is that something you've done during this?
I'd like to lie here and say, that I did, but when I said in the programme, I tied 3 flies, and they were the only 3 flies I'd tied in 30 years. I got into a real fly tying sort of rut, if you like, but a healthy rut. At the end of my sort of late 20s and into my 30s, and I'd do some spun deer hair muddlers and stuff like that, and I got really into it, and I'd do like focus lures, sea trout, sunk lures on tandems, and then I sort of let it slip, really, Pete. And but weirdly, I've been bombarded by a couple of our fishing WhatsApp group that we've got, and my mate has been tying all these spectacular flies every day, and he keeps saying these today, and he's done about 10 immaculate little, creations, and then weighs in again the next day. And I know he's doing it just to wind me up, to say, get back in your box, Whitehouse. Who do you think you are? Look, this is a master at work. So I did tie those flies for the programme. Let's say, I wouldn't say that they, would win any prizes, but caught me a trout. And that's the main thing, isn't it? You look at some of the creations and people come up with, and you go, wow. But as well as I do, a little dial bark, which is probably one of the easiest flies to tie, will catch you as many, if not more, fish than any trout, stillwater trout, and river trout, actually, as any number of highfalutin creations, But it becomes a thing in itself, doesn't it, fly tying? And you can see why it becomes such an obsession. And it's better than fishing because you don't have to put up with the river or the fish, do you? The moods of the fish.
Yeah, I always find from a time point of view, always have, and it sounds like you've got this one nailed anyway, but always have friends who have tie really good flies.
I think so. When I'm obsessed with fishing, Pete, but I'm more in my mind than, on a daily basis. And when I read articles by Paul Proctor, about leader construction, or I look in, is it Dan Stasiger, him on the Derbyshire Y? Brilliant anglers like that live on the river, and they're every waking moment. I mean, I'm just not in that league, and I never will be, So, and I'm quite happy being where I am. That fishing is or it was until the last 3 years, was my escape from, order, structure, real life, and filming. It was my escape from showbiz, and I suppose you might say that's a bit disingenuous when we've done the show, but there's a very specific reason for the show that I do with Bob, and I think it might be the reason why it's been quite successful, and that is because I've been asked to do fishing shows over the years, or guest on them, or co-present, and I've always said no, because it is my fishing is my absolute escape from the world, and I think it is for most people. That's why we love it so much. So the only reason that we ended up doing this was because it came out of real life, gone fishing with Bob. You know, it came out of Bob's illness, my illness, which wasn't quite as bad, you know, so I was Bob's kind of stent buddy, as it were, when I found out he had to have the procedure. And then, of course, when he went in, he had to have a triple bypass, which is far more serious than stents, you know. And so it was to try and get him back out and about, and that we started fishing together, because Bob's one of these people, and there are millions out there of anglers who I think a lot of them have taken it up in recent months again, who went fishing as kids and then let it lapse. I don't know about you. When I was young, every boy anyway around my street went fishing. We all went fishing, you know. We lived in North London, but where we were in Enfield, it's not very far, and you're out on the River Lee, up Cheshunt and Broxbourne, and so, you know, we all fished up around that way. And that Bob was had a similar experience in that he loved fishing, always wanted to go, had not been since he was a kid, and he kept badgering me to go over the years, you know, various gigs or shows together or whatever. And I promised it and never delivered, you know. And it wasn't until he had the heart scare I thought, well, better do it quick, or he might not be around. I remember we got as far as buying him a rod. So that took 15 years, and it took another 15 to actually get on the riverbank. And it was only when we were there and I realised I think we were on the test, you know, having a day. And it was a beautiful day, as it, you know what chalk streams are like. They're extraordinary places, and that sort of lost world. And I think he appreciated, like, Stockbridge. I think he thought was something out of a Margaret Rutherford novel, you know. And I think it all came together, and it all felt so right, and we were making each other laugh, probably not very politically correctly, and, you know, it just felt. I just thought, well, we might be able to do something with this, because it has a reason. It's not just two guys going fishing. There's a reason behind it and a motivation, and that was the heart disease and how beneficial angling can be. Plus, of course, the obvious advantage was there was a half-wit at my disposal who with no fishing skills whatsoever. So it made my fairly cumbersome efforts look okay. You know, it's always important, isn't it, to have a fight. I don't know about you, but, you know, I do a little bit of salmon fishing. It's a passion of mine, because I love spey casting. I'm not the world's best, but, you know, 50% of the time they go out really well, you know. Put somebody on the riverbank watching me, and that success rate goes down like that. So it was a tall order to get the cameras on the bank, and it was a little bit disconcerting when we first started, because we're both used to doing daft comedy characters. When I'm on the riverbank, though, I'm utterly focused on my fishing, and you can't be with him around annoying me, you know, and with cameras up on the bank there and cameras just up there, exactly where you don't want them to be. Where you know, if you're about to approach a river, you like to employ a bit of stealth, don't you? The last thing you want, never mind your own lack of stealth, but some stranger marches up and stands in the water 2 yards upstream of you, and then somebody else stands 2 yards downstream of you. You go, what have I let myself in for? And I have to say, the first few hours, I was thinking, oh no, what have I done? But you know, we sort of turned it around, and I think what we managed to do is show people the joy of fishing, not the how to or the wherewithal or the like I say, the leader construction or the bolt hair rig. That's just it's me. Chris Yates once said to me, "Carp still take maggots." You know, carp anglers kind of declared war on the carp about 3 decades ago. He says you can still catch them on a float in the margins, and we have to just be conscious of that sometimes, that we all become obsessed with tackle, don't we? And techniques. But actually, when it boils down to it, it's most of it is the joy of being on a river. And I don't actually like catching loads of fish, particularly. I've caught quite a lot in my time, and I just like being by the river as much as anything else. That don't get me wrong, I do like to catch fish, but the motivation is more about that than anything else.
And that's the really nice. I've got 1,000 questions going through my head, and I know we're relatively short on time, but I was just thinking though about what you said about the program and it not being a traditional fishing program in the sense of, like you say, leader construction and everything else. And I wonder if that was one of the big successes, because it engaged people on such a wider level as well. And I used to, having watched it on a Sunday night, I would go on to this TV thing called Digital Spy and look at the reviews. People would write about the program the next morning, and everyone without fail said something really nice about it. But the really interesting thing for me was that it were people who were saying, I've never fished before, this makes me want to do it. And I think that's one of the great successes of engaging people on such a wide basis.
Yeah, I think that's been the measure of the success of the show as well, is how many people who watch it say, I know it sounds sort of slightly sexist, but women, it's predominantly a male pursuit. That's there's no beating about the bush about that. But a lot of women who watched it, the program, can see the appeal and see why their husbands do it, or their partners. And it's not exclusively male, I know, but it certainly opened up a window for people who don't normally fish to appreciate what it is we get from it, But, it does take me back to our first day's filming, and suddenly I have to be, a presenter. And, this is the Derbyshire way and the indigenous species, brown trout. And then I talk about the spawning rainbow, which of course really means nothing to anyone other than, some trout fly fishers that, occurs in the Derbyshire Wye and maybe one or two other rivers, that's it. And we were very self-conscious, me and Bob, it was our first day. And then about half an hour later, I get a fish. So thank God, it looks like I know what I'm doing. Upstream nymph, and I get this rainbow, and Bob gets the net, comes down the bank, goes over, slides down the muddy sort of bank like that, hits me, takes me out, and we're both on the floor in the mud. I'm playing this fish, and in my mind, all I thought was, the angling world is going to go mad. You're going to go, these two buffoons presenting angling, in this manner, and that's all I could think of as I was playing this fish. Anyway, I got it in. And I show it. It's quite a big rainbow, and it's got. I was saying, "This is," and I said, "This is a wild rainbow, Bob." Of course, it wasn't. It stopped at a blue spot underneath. But of course, I'd already said that, So day one was littered with mistakes, and we were very self-conscious, and I was especially about the angler's response. But like you say, luckily, people seem to have gone with it because they realise actually, in the final analysis, like you say, that the technicalities are not what's important. And we have opened a little door to people who wouldn't normally watch a fishing show. So, yeah, it's a joy. And we love it. We're so lucky, me and Bob. We're absolutely the luckiest people, But as I said to Simon Day from the Fast Show, when he said, "Why don't you do it with me?" I said, "Well, you've got to have heart disease to join." You got to have had a heart attack first, Simon, or you're not in. So, you have to jump through some hoops in order to do it. But yes, it's a joy that we've managed to appeal to a sort of broader public. And I think, as we sort of say in our rather sort of arch way, me and Bob, that one of the biggest stars, or the biggest star of the show, is the British countryside and our beautiful and rather fragile rivers and ecosystems, which hopefully, by presenting them, the way we do, that people can see how important and precious they are to everyone, which lockdown has certainly sort of shown us, hasn't it? And
I was going to mention actually that it was really interesting that we'd had Fergal as a guest on here, and I thought it was really cool on a wider basis to have him on that program and talk to people about what's going on. Because, like you say, you could easily do the fluffy stuff, but that needed to be said. And I think, having spoken to a lot of people on these podcasts as well about the programs consistently come up, but putting that in was, from the fishing point of view and to the angling community, I think was really, really important, and big thumbs up for that one as well.
Yeah, it was, Fergal was such a laid voice, so he is now. As he not? No, so he is now. A lucky Irishman, as he describes himself. And, that we were on the River Lee there. We weren't on some exclusive chalk stream beat in Hampshire or anything like that. It was just the River Lee, the Upper Lee. And we fished also at King's Weir, which is where I used to fish a lot as a kid. It's a hard water, you know what I mean? It gets fished a lot, and you got to know your onions. And I don't really know my onions anymore, but but we trotted the tail of the weir and got some lovely little dace and a couple of little chub and roach, and that was a joy. Anyway, the point of getting Fergal involved is that I think he still is the vice chairman of the Anmore Magna Club, which is a tributary of the Upper Lee. So he was able to say, this is what you need to do to a chalk stream. He's been campaigning long and hard, and he's his background, being brought up in Northern Ireland in the 70s and 80s, he has no fear of the British government, you would say. So he's quite happy to go up against an MP, no matter what their background. He's straight in there, he's a terrier. And I have every faith that he, you can't just pin it all on one individual, but he's got so much energy and vitality, and he's able to be confrontational, but in a positive way, that I think he really will, help raise the awareness about our rivers. As we're fighting on lots of fronts. The Angling Trust are brilliant. I think, as you say, our show has helped. Maybe even things like Great Canal Journeys, weirdly, that showcase our landscape. That has generated a bit of a love for the British countryside, and it's certainly something that Bob and I are very conscious of. That that's what we want to showcase, how beautiful and precious this sort of resource is, if you like, and it's on our doorstep. Even most waters are accessible somehow, even on managed estates. We fish the Usk, we fish the Wye. You can get on the Usk and the Wye on some amazing beats on the passport, the Usk and Wye passport, and even day ticket on some of the estates. You can get on if you make your application, and it's cheap. It's certainly cheap compared to going to the football or a similar pursuit, and probably a lot cheaper than golf, I would imagine. So although there are exclusive places, and we're lucky enough to have occasional access to those, there are many places that I would say come higher on my list than some exclusive beats. But again, it is there and it is available in many places for people to get access to our beautiful countryside and rivers. So it's been a privilege to be able to sort of imply that with the show,
Yeah, and I think the lockdown really, along with the program and everything else, really encouraged people to get out, whether they were fishing or not, whether it's cycling, whatever it is. And it seems like you say, this love of the British countryside has rekindled with a lot of people on a different levels. That's really encouraging, isn't it, from a fitness point of view and everything else that goes with it. So long may that continue.
Sort of topic these days, isn't it? And sometimes I think we can probably go overboard on it, but in a way, when you look around the world, you'd be mad not to be mad in a way, wouldn't you? So you do need a release from it all. And what better release than nature? Which actually brings me to something else. We can be a bit partisan anglers. Like I say, I was even concerned during our first episode when me and Bob had fallen over on the bank, playing the fish, that we would almost, some people would be looking at and going, look at these idiots, what are they doing? And thankfully we haven't, because I think people realise that what we're doing is is saying what a joy the process is and what a wonderful privilege it is. But we can be a little bit canoeists, we're anti-canoeists, we're anti other people using. We can't be. Actually, what we need to do is sort of embrace everybody wants to use the rivers, explain why it might not be a good idea to get access to a river here with a canoe because it's a spawning bed or it's fragile. But as a general movement to embrace the countryside and our rivers, we have to, we have to acknowledge that actually these people are allies. I've got one or two mates who are free swimmers. Now if I was fishing and one of them jumped in near me, I might not be very happy. But as a general movement, we have to celebrate the fact that everybody, wants to appreciate the countryside, and just, we just have to, because if we don't come together and do it, then we won't be able to explain, and that antagonism will go on. There's no need for it to be antagonistic, our relationship with countryside. Everyone's entitled to do it. The only thing we can say, of course, as anglers, is that we contribute financially to the upkeep of our rivers and lakes, and we are probably more attuned to the health of rivers and do more to maintain those rivers and fish stocks than any other group. So, we should give ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back, but not get too complacent. John Bailey, a legendary angler and our sort of fishing consultant on the show, and a really good mate of mine, he knows his stuff, he really does. And he's very glad that Fergal is on the case, and he's seriously worried about some of the agricultural pollution that has affected a lot of our rivers, because he's seen a marked decline until very recently, actually. And I think he's seen some signs of of hope in some of the rivers around his part of East Anglia, where he knows the rivers very well. So there is hope, and there are people who are working very hard on our behalf and everyone else's behalf, and they are generally anglers. So hats off to us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been interesting that what we've tried to do is I know off mic we talked about social media a little bit, but that's one of the really positive things about it. And what we've tried to do is encourage people to take photos, put them on Instagram, put them on Twitter, put them on Facebook, wherever it is, and tag in the Environment Agency if there's a pollution incident, and make sure people are aware of those sorts of things. And that's coming through now with people. And I've said on many of these podcasts that it feels as though the volume has been turned up. I think it's Fergal who's probably turned the volume up to 11, and that's engaged for many people.
He really has gone Spinal Tap on it, hasn't he? And that's because that's his world as well. But the funny thing was, that's absolutely true about Fergal is our sort of mouthpiece at the moment. He really is. But it was funny about getting him on. We thought, it's not really, we're not a crusading show, and it's difficult to be crusading on the BBC, but it's essential that we highlight the plight of these rivers. Mainly, as much as agricultural pollution, abstraction, which is something that's really affected some of the rivers that Fergal is talking about. But obviously he's widened his net now. And he claims that there are big plans afoot to try and stop abstraction being such an issue, with water diversion from areas where, there is extreme rainfall and stuff like that. So that's great. But, it's an interesting sideline with Fergal is that it's absolutely true. When I was much younger and better looking, I did an audition for a group called That Petrol Emotion, which was the Undertones after Fergal Sharkey had left.
Wow.
And I did an audition as the singer. I was terrible. I mean, I am a very good singer, don't get me wrong, but I couldn't do their stuff. But anyway, it was a nice little sort of thing that united us on a couple of fronts, you know. And I'm going to catch up with him after lockdown and see where he is, because he's an interesting and passionate guy, as you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I used to be a member of Amwell Magna as well, and that's where I first sort of
Yeah.
bumped into him many years ago.
Oh, actually,
Um,
I think I knew that actually, Pete. Yeah, that's it's a lovely little fishery, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I've not seen it for a long time, so I left there for the streams of Devon. But
yeah.
he tells me, and other members tell me that it's look at Hugh. I think it is. We're saying it's absolutely fantastic, and like you say, the model of what they've done there is really fantastic.
Well, what's extraordinary about that, and is that while a lot of other rivers in that area, the Mimran, for example, I know because I've
Mm,
seen them just disappear. It's actually
mm,
disappeared in places, and that certainly is not happening in Amor Magna because they're quite combative and they've got influence and power, and of course we just need to give other areas and other places that same influence and power. Not, they're lucky that they've got a clientele that can move in high places, but it shouldn't be the preserve of just them. It should, as I say, John Bailey, is shouting the score from up there, and I know people all round, the country are doing the same. So,
yeah.
we are at the forefront, and let's sort of welcome everyone else in, but stay at the forefront of our river's health and wealth.
Yeah, fantastic. Well put. I wanted to ask you about your fishing, and you touched on salmon there a little bit. Of the
Yeah,
fly fishing species, and one of the things I wanted to also mention actually was that it was really cool to see you getting the fly rod out when you were pike fishing as well, and that seems to be having another
yeah.
big upsurge this winter as well, which is fantastic to see. But out of the traditional salmonoid family, do you sort of embrace them all, as it were, or is there one that has a special place with you?
Well, first, can I just say, because I actually wanted to mention a guy who is sort of one of my fishing heroes. He probably doesn't get talked about much unless you're in the sort of know in the angling world. And that pike on a fly is exactly his forte, and that's John Hall at Broadlands. I don't know if you know John.
Yeah, yeah,
He's the
yeah,
keeper down there. You know him?
yeah,
The man is hench,
yeah.
He's a hero, I think, and he's a brilliant angler. And the fish that he's caught, the pike that he's caught on a fly, are unbelievable, and he loves them. He's got this prime stretch of trout, and salmon, some salmon in there as well. But the man is a beast, with the fly for pike. He's caught some absolute monsters, and he loves the pike, treasures them. He knows they're absolutely essential in that stretch to maintain the balance. And he sort of showed me how to fly fish for pike. I'm not very good at it. I've only done it a couple of times, but it's a joy to do. And the first day that I went, I took Bob and we set him up trotting for some grayling. And I went off with John, and I got it took me a long while. I think Bob thought, "Who is this fraud?" I got one about £5, and then 5 minutes later, I sent him a picture of a 21-pounder I'd got about literally 5 minutes after the first. So, sort of about 3 fruitless hours, and then bang, bang, and a 21-pounder on the fly. So, I just want to mention John as an angling legend. I think he's caught barbel up over 15 pound on a fly. He's unbelievable, and so that was something I wanted to mention. So thanks for giving me the intro. But to answer your question, I think I've loved fishing at Park on the River Dee. I used to go there with my dad and for salmon. And years ago, when me and my mate, we used to fish the River Lee, as I say, so the idea that we would one day fish on the Dee, we thought that would never happen. And we sort of gradually were able to get onto it. And it used to be a beat that you could not fish at all. It was only by invitation. but now you can get on it. Well, for 20 odd years, it's been like that. And there is something magical about the take of a salmon and the spey cast that I love. So if you were to sort of restrict me to one form of fishing, I would probably go that, but primarily for the casting, I think. I just love a single spey, you know, and I don't do it very often. I mean, 5 times, 6 times a year, I might, you know, get out, and I mean 5 days a year. So it's a bit rusty, but when you get in that rhythm, there's nothing better, I don't think. And I like to be in the river as well. That's lovely. And so that would be my ultimate fishing experience. But I qualify that very quickly and say nothing beats a tench on the float, and nothing beats trotting for grayling on the float. But perhaps because I'm not as competent with the nymph as I should be, but there's something about a float that still really appeals to me. I'm going to qualify things again. People really get annoyed with me because I won't be decisive to say one thing. I'll go, but I think it's very important to have these caveats in life, right? Of course, if I was limited to one species only on the fly, it would have to be the brown trout, because there are so many ways you can fish and so many environments you can fish for a trout with hope of success. Dry fly, nymph, wet, downstream, wet, loch style, all of those, and I love them all. You know, I absolutely love them. So now I've talked myself around, and I suppose if I was limited to one thing, it would be the trout, definitely.
Yeah, they're hard to beat, aren't they? But like you say, that pull, and I've said many times on here before, down here, we don't get many salmon to play at, but you put in all of those hours just for that moment, just for that to happen. My wife's exactly the same, that, you know, the casting, she loves the casting, and a fish happens to be a very, very happy byproduct of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say I've caught some very big salmon, but I mean, one of the favourite salmon I've ever caught was under 10 pounds. But there was something about the whole process, the wading. I saw it show. I was able to cover it with a good spey cast, you know, which I think what it made me realise that there's 25, 30 years behind that whole sequence, you know, to get that fish. And if I hadn't done that, I would never have caught that fish. No chance, you know. So it all had to come together in one beautiful moment, and I covered the fish around. It went, and off goes that draw, slow lift. Don't strike. What are you doing? Lift. I remember my first salmon on a double-ended rod. I was only thinking about it this morning, and it was a beat on the D. It was a hotel beat. It wasn't a good beat or a good time of year, but we had to get our foot in the door, you know. And we'd get up at the crack of dawn because we were high summer. There's not really a chance of fish, you know. And I had an intermediate line, a very small fly. And I went down this pool, and I thought, little roll cast, and remember what happens is the line tightens, you don't strike. And I've never done it, and the line stopped, and I thought, no, this is it. This is a salmon has taken my fly. I mustn't strike. I must lift slowly, and I did. I did it all in such slow motion. I went, yes, and it worked. It's magical, isn't it? And it worked.
Yeah.
And I landed fish. So yeah, the most memorable fish are those kind of things, aren't they? Not the biggest or the boldest. It's those moments where your mind, you know, works, and it all seems to, the world narrows down and all comes together. Yeah. Am I getting too here?
Oh no, that's nice. We like the poetry here, so that's the poetic.
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And whether you should use a water knot or a tucked blood. Maxima.
You're clear. Yeah. Tell me something. Is it true that one of your fast show characters, Rolly Birkin, was based on somebody you salmon fished with?
Yeah, he was a guy I met in Iceland. Yeah, and we stayed at this lodge on the Ranga, and there was. I don't know if you know the setup, you know, in a lodge like that. You all have your rooms, but you all come together around a big communal, you know, dining table, and you all meet, have a drink, and then you eat around the table. and there was this guy there, and he was with this rather sort of doughty woman, you know, like another Margaret Rutherford character. She kept him on a short lead, you know, and he was sitting there, he goes, yeah, like, yeah, it's lovely. And I went out there, that bloody actor chappie, and he was talking to me, and I think he meant me. That bloody actor chappie was down there. And I said, do you mean me? Yeah, no. And I mean, honestly, he'd talk away, and you could only get about half of what he said. I thought, well, this is a perfect character for the Fast Show, you know. It's absolutely, you couldn't make it up. And I just lifted it and then added some sort of phrases that would give him a romantic life, like Cairo, or poisonous mushrooms, you know. And we ended every little scenario with I'm afraid I was very, very drunk. So, and he could be very happy or very sad, you know, or very intrepid, trapped under the ice. But if you watch Rowdy Birkin, and I'm not saying you should, you'll see me doing little movements like that occasionally. And there's a little roll cast in there, and there's a little bit of Hugh Fawcus, who I did have some spay casting lessons with. And well, I better not start talking about that, but they were liquid affairs, shall we say?
Lovely. Well, we're going to start. I know you're incredibly busy, and we're going to start winding up. But I wanted to really ask you if you had a dream place that you haven't visited. Where would be the one place that you haven't visited that you'd love to say, yeah, that's the one. You've got a day's fishing, and that's where you'd love to go visit.
That's a good question. I've fished some extraordinary places, and I mean, one of my favourite places is Lake Thingvellir in Iceland. The trout there have to be seen to be believed. It's just extraordinary in certain places, and you know, obviously it's a very cold lake, but there are certain inlets that provide some sort of warm water, you know, geothermal little inlets. And I think these fish, they're like ferrets, really. They feed on the small char, and so they come quite close in, and you can get them on lures, but you can also get them on little drives and nymphs at certain times, and that's extraordinary fishing. So that I mean, but I've done that. What's that place? You know, do you know where I've never been down to Tierra del Fuego? And I'd love to have a bash at the sea trout down there, but I'm not sure that my heart doctor would let me go down that far away from an A&E department. So, but yeah, in a perfect world, I'd like to go down there, stop over in Buenos Aires, have a nice steak and a nice glass of red, and then get on down to Tierra del Fuego. That would be lovely. Yeah.
That sounds a very, very fair shout. Yeah, that's a place I've dreamed about as well. So perhaps one day, Well, I'd like to say a huge thank you for talking with me, Paul, and many congratulations. Am I right in thinking that you've got a fourth series as well?
Yes, yeah, we have, and yeah, so we're very, very pleased about that, and we've got a Christmas special as well, which which we're not sure when it's going to be out. Obviously, it'll be out before Christmas, but yeah. So yeah, Bob and I are very pleased about that, and we're just want to say thank you to everyone who supported the program and got behind it, and it's so lovely to have chosen the moment, the right moment to do the show, where it really seems to have sort of gelled and worked with the public beyond the angling, fraternity. Although obviously that was the initial thing. The fact that we've managed to make angling resonate a bit, on a wider scale, I think is very important. As part of a wider push, I think, to try and make sure that our rivers get treated properly.
Yeah. Well, I'd also like to, and I think on behalf of anglers, say thank you to you guys as well for the way that you've portrayed fishing to the wider community. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for being such a fantastic guest, Paul, as well, and taking the time to talk to me. I greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure, Pete. It's been an absolute joy. I could yap on for hours, but I've got to go to the dentist. All the best, mate.
Thanks everyone for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me, and I hope that you'll be tuning in for some more very soon. Thanks everyone for listening.